"I'll give you the best suite if you have the balance," laughed Kevin Martinez, manager of the Grand Plaza Hotel, as he watched the 12-year-old boy standing in the marble lobby. The words echoed through the luxurious environment, causing elegant guests to turn their heads to witness the spectacle unfolding before the golden reception desk. The boy held a worn backpack and an old cell phone, his faded sneakers contrasting sharply with the mirrored floor of the five-star hotel. His name was David Washington, and at 12 years old, he never imagined that a simple hotel reservation would turn into the most humiliating moment of his life. "Sir, I have a reservation," David repeated calmly, sliding a crumpled piece of paper across the marble counter. His voice didn't waver, but his eyes revealed a maturity unusual for someone so young, as if he had already weathered storms far worse than the laughter of arrogant adults. Kevin picked up the paper with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. "Presidential suite for a week? Kid, do you know how much that costs?" $40,000. He waved the paper in the air like a victory flag. "Where did you get that name? Did you steal it from a guest?" The entire lobby turned to watch the scene. A woman in a fur coat whispered to her husband. An executive in a suit paused his phone call. Even the doorman stopped polishing the gold fixtures to watch the public humiliation of a child. David took a deep breath, his fists clenching slightly inside his jacket pockets. "I didn't steal anything. This reservation is legitimate." His voice maintained a calm that irritated Kevin even more, as if the boy knew something that everyone else there was unaware of. "Legitimate?" Kevin laughed, turning to his colleagues behind the counter. "Guys, check this out. We have a little con artist here." He pointed at David as if he were a circus attraction. "I bet he doesn't even have a credit card. He probably doesn't even know what a bank account is." A quick flashback crossed David's mind, 3 days earlier at home, when he received the call that would change everything. The lawyer's formal voice echoed in his ears. "David, there's something about your inheritance you need to know. Something your grandfather kept secret all these years." Back in the present, David stood up straight as Kevin continued his show for the unwilling audience. "Look at him," the manager sneered. 12 years old, alone, wanting the best suite in the hotel. Next thing he'll tell us is that he's the son of some billionaire. The silence in the lobby was deafening. David felt all eyes on him, judging him by his simple clothes, his old backpack, the color of his skin. But in his eyes shone something Kevin couldn't decipher, a serenity that only exists in those who keep secrets too powerful to be revealed before the right time. There, in front of all the looks of contempt, David stood firm, like someone who knows that some storms are just the prelude to clearer skies. If this story of prejudice and overcoming adversity touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple moment of humiliation would become the catalyst for a revolution that no one would ever forget. Kevin Martinez was clearly enjoying himself. With 15 years of experience at the Grand Plaza Hotel, he had developed a sadistic ability to identify imposters and turn them into entertainment for the truly important guests. David Washington, with his 12 years and simple appearance, was the perfect target. "Front desk staff, come see this," Kevin shouted, beckoning the other employees to come closer. "We have a little businessman here who wants our presidential suite." He paused dramatically, watching as a curious audience formed. "Kid, tell me something. Do you even know where the bathroom is in your house?" Laughter echoed through the marble lobby. An elderly lady with sparkling jewelry murmured to her companion, "How neglectful. Where are this child's parents?" A middle-aged executive stopped typing on his cell phone only to shake his head in disapproval. David remained motionless, but something changed in his gaze. It wasn't anger, it was a calculated coldness that Kevin misinterpreted as fear. "Mr. Martinez," David said, reading the manager's name tag, "can I speak to your supervisor?" Kevin burst out laughing even louder. "My supervisor? Kid, I am the supervisor here. This is my house, and you," he pointed dramatically. "You're just another lost kid who shouldn't even be here." What Kevin didn't know was that David had grown up in situations far worse than this. Orphaned at the age of 7, raised by a grandfather who worked his entire life as a janitor in commercial buildings, David had learned early on that dignity doesn't come from where you live or what you wear, but from how you react when the world tries to break you. 3 days earlier, when the lawyer called about the mysterious inheritance left by someone David didn't even know existed, his first reaction was suspicion. Your biological grandfather, Mr. Washington, was a very private person. He specifically requested that this information only be revealed when you turn 12. The flashback was interrupted by Kevin clapping loudly, as if to tame an animal. Attention, ladies and gentlemen. Our young guest is going to explain exactly how he intends to pay $40,000 for a week. He leaned over the counter, his face inches from David's. Are you going to sell lemonade on the corner? More laughter. David took a deep breath, his hands still firmly in his pockets. Inside one of them, he held a black card that Kevin assumed was a bus pass. In fact, it was something that would completely change that scene of humiliation. Mr. Martinez, David said again, his voice maintaining an unnatural calm, I have a simple question. Do you believe that appearances always tell the truth about a person? Kevin frowned, confused by the philosophical tone of the question. What does that have to do with anything? Kid, you're wasting my time and that of our guests. It's an honest question, David insisted. Because I'm looking at you right now, seeing a middle-aged man who works behind a counter, wearing a uniform borrowed from a company that isn't even yours, and yet you act like you own the place. The silence that followed was deafening. The laughter stopped abruptly. Kevin felt his face flush. That kid had touched a raw nerve. How dare he? Listen here, you insolent brat, Kevin growled, his voice losing its theatricality and gaining genuine anger. I'm calling security right now. You'll be dragged out of here if necessary. David nodded calmly, as if he had expected exactly that reaction. Sure, Mr. Martinez. But before that, can I check in my reservation? Or would you rather continue making assumptions about me? That's when Kevin made his biggest mistake. Instead of simply checking the system, he let his ego get the better of him. You want to bet? Let's do this, kid. If you can actually pay for this suite, I'll personally carry your bags there. But when they find out you're lying, not only will you be kicked out, I'll make sure every hotel in town knows about you. The proposal echoed through the lobby like an official challenge. David smiled for the first time since he had arrived, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, but carried something that made Kevin feel an inexplicable chill down his spine. Perfect, David said, finally taking his hand out of his pocket. Then let's check it out right now. Each new humiliation Kevin had dealt out had only fueled something inside David that the arrogant manager couldn't see, a silent strength being nourished by the very injustice they were trying to impose. What that privileged man didn't know was that every act of contempt was writing his own sentence of defeat, and that some storms begin just when everyone thinks the sky is clear. David slowly removed his hand from his pocket, revealing a matte black card that seemed to absorb the light in the lobby. Kevin glanced at it dismissively and laughed even louder, as if he had just seen the joke of the century. Seriously? A black plastic card. Kevin clapped his hands theatrically. Kid, did you buy that from a gumball machine? Or did you make it at home out of cardboard? He turned to the audience of curious guests. Folks, just look at the creativity of this generation. What Kevin didn't notice was the sudden silence that fell among the more experienced staff at the front desk. Lisa, the night supervisor with 20 years of experience in luxury hospitality, frowned as she recognized something familiar about that card. She whispered something to her colleague next to her, but Kevin was too busy with his show to notice. David remained impassive as Kevin continued his humiliating performance. Let me guess, you're going to tell me that this little card has an unlimited limit? That you're the son of some secret billionaire? Kevin laughed so hard that tears formed in his eyes. My God, what an imagination. It was then that David did something unexpected. Instead of defending himself or trying to explain, he simply slid the card across the counter toward Lisa, completely ignoring Kevin. Miss, could you please check this card in the system? Kevin intercepted the card before Lisa could take it. No. I'm the manager here, and I'll check this joke. He examined the card with disdain, turning it over and over. It doesn't even have the bank's name printed on it. Amateur. What Kevin didn't know was that this particular type of card was known only to elite employees at very high-end establishments. Lisa discreetly tried to get his attention, but he was determined to conduct his own investigation. You know what we're going to do? Kevin announced dramatically. I'm going to run this little card through the system, in front of everyone, to put an end to this charade once and for all. He waved the card in the air like a trophy. And when it bounces, because it will bounce, this little punk is going to be escorted out of here by security. David nodded calmly. Perfect. But before I do that, can I make a quick phone call? Kevin burst out laughing again. Call who? Your babysitter? To tell her you're going to be late for school. Actually, David said, taking his old cell phone out of his pocket, my lawyer. The word lawyer made some guests raise their eyebrows, but Kevin just shook his head with even more disdain. Lawyer. A 12-year-old kid with a lawyer. How about calling Santa Claus too? David dialed a number and put the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. After 2 rings, a professional, serious voice answered. Morrison and Associates, Dr. Richard Morrison speaking. Dr. Morrison, this is David Washington. I'm at the Grand Plaza Hotel and would like you to confirm the details of the account that was opened in my name. On the other end of the line, the voice immediately became warmer. David. Of course, young man. Is everything going well at the hotel? Is the management treating you properly? Kevin frowned, clearly bothered by the respectful tone of the supposed lawyer. But he still maintained his arrogance. Very well rehearsed, he muttered to his colleagues. It's probably his buddy on the other end. Dr. Morrison, David continued, keeping the phone on speaker, could you remind the people present what amount was deposited into the account you opened for me yesterday? A pause. Then the voice returned, clear and firm, certainly. An initial deposit of $15 million was made, coming from the testamentary inheritance that your biological grandfather, Jonathan Washington, left specifically for you. The rest of the inheritance, including the properties and investments, is being processed and should be released in the coming weeks. The silence in the lobby was deafening. Kevin turned white as a sheet. Lisa let out a muffled gasp. Even the most distracted guests stopped fiddling with their cell phones to process what they had just heard. Thank you, Dr. Morrison. The manager here was questioning the legitimacy of my reservation. Manager questioning? The lawyer's voice hardened noticeably. David, are you being treated with disrespect? I need to remind you that your family has significant connections in the hotel industry, and any inappropriate treatment could result in serious consequences for the establishment. Kevin swallowed hard. His hands began to shake slightly as he held the black card, which suddenly seemed much heavier. David calmly hung up and looked directly at Kevin. Now, Mr. Martinez, how about we check that card in the system? I'm sure you're eager to find out the truth. Kevin looked around, realizing for the first time that all the stares were no longer ones of amusement, but of tension and expectation. Lisa approached discreetly, whispering urgently in his ear, Kevin, I recognize this type of card. It's an exclusive black card from Zurich International Private Bank. They only issue them for accounts over 10 million. But Kevin had already dug himself into too deep a hole to stop now. His hands visibly shaking, he walked over to the payment terminal, the black card in his sweaty palms like a bomb about to explode. David watched everything with a disturbing calmness, as if he knew exactly what was about to happen. Something new shone in his eyes, no longer the wounded dignity of a humiliated child, but the quiet confidence of someone who was about to completely rewrite the rules of the game they were playing. There, in front of everyone who had laughed at his simple appearance and doubted his word, David Washington was prepared to show that some lessons are learned in the most humiliating way possible, and that underestimating someone based on prejudice can be the most costly mistake a person makes in their entire professional life. Kevin held the black card with visibly trembling hands, sweat forming beads on his forehead as he walked to the terminal. The entire lobby had turned into a silent theater, where every breath seemed amplified and every movement Kevin made was watched with the intensity of someone witnessing an accident in slow motion. Let's get this charade over with, Kevin muttered to himself, trying to regain some of his lost confidence. But his voice came out weak, almost inaudible, a pathetic shadow of the arrogance he had displayed minutes before. Lisa remained close by, her 20 years of experience in luxury hotels making her recognize the signs of an impending professional catastrophe. She tried one last time, Kevin, maybe I should check that card. I have more experience with. No. Kevin cut her off abruptly, but his voice cracked in the middle of the word. I said I'd check it, and I will. He inserted the card into the terminal with unnecessary force, as if he wanted to break both the card and the machine. David watched everything with a disturbing calm, like a conductor waiting for the exact moment for the orchestra to play the final note of a symphony. His eyes showed no anger or anxiety, just the infinite patience of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. The terminal beeped for the first time. Kevin typed in the reservation amount, $40,000. His hands were shaking so much that he mistyped the numbers twice before getting them right. The machine processed for a few seconds that seemed like an eternity. Then it happened. The screen flashed. Once. Twice. And then it displayed a message that made Kevin feel as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Transaction approved. Available balance, $15,247,891.33. Kevin read the number once. Then again. His eyes blinked rapidly, as if trying to ward off a hallucination. $15,247,891. That can't be right, Kevin whispered, his voice completely devoid of its previous arrogance. He looked at the card, then at the screen, then at David. It has to be a system error. Lisa stepped closer and looked over Kevin's shoulder. When she saw the balance, her face instantly paled. "My God," she whispered. "Kevin, do you know what you just did?" But Kevin was still in denial. "It's impossible. A child can't have that kind of money. It has to be fraud, it has to be." "Mr. Martinez," David's voice cut through the growing panic like a sharp blade. "Would you like to check again? Or perhaps you'd prefer to call Zurich International Bank to confirm the authenticity of the account." The mention of Zurich Bank made Kevin gulp. This was one of the most exclusive private banks in the world, known for serving only clients with net worths above $10 million. Lisa closed her eyes, knowing that Kevin's career had ended at that very moment. The guests in the lobby began whispering among themselves, the words 15 million spreading from mouth to mouth like wildfire. An elderly lady commented to her husband, "My God, Henry, the manager was humiliating a child who has more money than we will ever see." Kevin tried one last desperate gambit. "Listen, kid. David. I didn't know, obviously, if I had known that I was rich." David interrupted him, his voice maintaining that unnatural calm. "Interesting. So you only treat people with respect when they have money?" The question echoed through the lobby like a moral sentence. Kevin opened and closed his mouth several times, like a fish out of water, unable to formulate a response that wouldn't condemn him even further. "Mr. Martinez," David continued, "you said you would personally carry my bags if I could pay for the suite. Are you ready to keep your word?" Kevin looked around desperately, seeking support, mercy, anything that could save him from complete humiliation. But he found only looks of disapproval and disgust. Even the employees shied away from him as if his incompetence were contagious. I can explain," Kevin stammered. "It was a misunderstanding, I never meant to." "You never wanted what?" David asked, taking a step forward. "You never wanted to humiliate me publicly? You never wanted to make jokes about my appearance? You never wanted to turn a child into a spectacle to entertain your customers?" Each of David's words was like a hammer, systematically breaking down all the arrogance Kevin had built up over the years. The manager who moments before had thought himself the king of his little empire now looked like a beggar pleading for mercy. It was then that David took out his cell phone again. "Dr. Morrison, may I bother you once more?" The lawyer's voice returned to the speakerphone. "Of course, David. How was the check-in?" "Interesting," David replied, looking directly at Kevin. "The manager here, Mr. Kevin Martinez, publicly accused me of theft, made jokes about my age and skin color, and turned my attempt to check in into entertainment for the guests. I would like your legal opinion on this." The lawyer's silence was eloquent. When he spoke again, his voice was icy. "David, this constitutes racial discrimination, humiliation of a minor, and possibly defamation. Mr. Martinez and the hotel could face both criminal and civil charges. And considering that your family now has significant resources for a protracted legal battle." Kevin felt his legs buckle. Lawsuits. Lawyers. His career wasn't just over. He could face complete financial ruin. "Dr. Morrison," David said calmly, "could you please contact the general manager of the Grand Plaza? I believe he would like to know how his employees treat guests who make $40,000 reservations." "Certainly." And David, considering the gravity of the situation, it might be appropriate to involve the local media as well. Stories of discrimination at elite establishments tend to receive a lot of attention. Kevin finally understood. That 12-year-old boy wasn't just rich, he had resources, connections, And worse, he was acting with a calculated strategy that Kevin could never have anticipated. His humiliation would not be private. It would be public, devastating, and permanent. "Please," Kevin whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, I beg you. I have a family, children. I can't lose my job. It was just a mistake, I swear." David hung up the phone and looked at Kevin with an expression that mixed disappointment and pity. "Mr. Martinez, when you humiliated me, did you think about my family? When you laughed at my appearance, did you consider my feelings? When you accused me of theft, did you care about the impact of your words?" Kevin lowered his head, defeated. There was no possible answer that could save him. At that moment, the elevator doors opened and a man in an impeccable suit emerged hurriedly. It was James Richardson, the general manager of the Grand Plaza, clearly having been informed of the situation. His face was red with anger as he walked directly toward Kevin. "Martinez. My office. Now." His voice echoed through the lobby like thunder. He turned to David, his expression immediately softening. "Mr. Washington, please accept our deepest apologies. This is unacceptable and there will be immediate consequences." Kevin looked at David one last time, his pleading eyes asking for mercy he knew he didn't deserve. But David simply nodded calmly, like a judge who had just handed down a fair sentence. As Kevin was escorted toward the elevator, his career and reputation destroyed, David remained in the lobby like a pillar of unshakable dignity. There, before everyone who had witnessed his initial humiliation, he had demonstrated that true strength does not come from shouting or fighting back against aggression. It comes from maintaining composure while allowing the arrogance of others to destroy them. And as the echo of Kevin's footsteps faded into the elevator that would take him to his professional ruin, one question remained in the thick air of the lobby. Could it be that a 12-year-old boy had orchestrated not only a defense against prejudice, but a life lesson that no one there would ever forget? 3 hours later, David Washington walked through the corridors of the Grand Plaza Hotel with a dignity that completely transformed the atmosphere of the place. James Richardson, the general manager, personally accompanied him to the presidential suite, carrying his backpack as if it were a priceless treasure. "Mr. Washington, please accept our complimentary hospitality throughout your stay," Richardson said, opening the double doors to the suite. "And again, our deepest apologies for the unacceptable treatment you received." The presidential suite was stunning. Panoramic windows, grand piano, dining room for 12. David nodded calmly, as if he had always belonged in that world of luxury. "Thank you, Mr. Richardson. I hope this incident serves as a lesson to your entire staff." Meanwhile, on the lower floors, Kevin Martinez cleaned his personal desk under the curious glances of his colleagues. His dismissal had been immediate and humiliating, escorted by security, forbidden from returning to the hotel premises. 15 years of career destroyed in a single afternoon of arrogance. "Kevin really thought he could humiliate a child like that," whispered one receptionist to another. "How disgusting. How could he have the nerve to look that boy in the eye and laugh?" What Kevin didn't know was that his humiliation was just beginning. Dr. Morrison had kept his word. Local journalists already had the full story about racial discrimination at the Grand Plaza Hotel. The name Kevin Martinez would become synonymous with prejudice and professional incompetence throughout the hotel industry. Lisa, now temporarily promoted to Kevin's position, knocked on the door of the presidential suite. "Mr. Washington, there are media representatives in the lobby wanting to speak with you. How would you like to proceed?" David was on the balcony, watching the city below. "Tell them I have no interest in talking about what happened. This story isn't about revenge, it's about teaching that dignity doesn't depend on anyone's bank account." A week later, David returned to his modest apartment in Queens, but he carried something that no amount of money could buy, the certainty that he had not only changed his own life, but touched the conscience of dozens of people who had witnessed his journey. The Grand Plaza implemented new mandatory training on diversity and respect. Kevin never got another job in the hotel industry. His name had spread as a warning among employers in the sector. He now worked as an attendant in a snack bar, earning in a month what David spent on a meal. 3 months later, David used part of his inheritance to create a foundation that offered educational programs for vulnerable children. "I want other children to never go through what I went through," he explained to Dr. Morrison. "But I also want them to know that when it does happen, they have value regardless of what any ignorant adult might say." What began as a simple hotel reservation had turned into a national lesson about prejudice, dignity, and the quiet strength that exists within every person who refuses to accept humiliation as normal. Kevin learned the hard way that underestimating someone based on appearances can cost you everything you've built. David discovered that true wealth isn't in what you own, but in how you react when the world tries to diminish who you are. The story of a 12-year-old boy who held his head high in the face of ignorance proved that some moments define not only who we are, but who we choose to become when we face our next storm. If this story of dignity and overcoming adversity touched you, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories that show how true strength comes from within, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply to live well enough to prove your detractors completely wrong about who you really are.